Deputy Niamh Smith, who has 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Laska Hirlik. Minister, thank you for being here with us today. The matter I want to raise with you today is the ambulance response times in my own constituency of Cavan Monaghan. And unfortunately, I have to bring a very harrowing case of something that actually happened to a family in County Monaghan. Last July, a young man of 44 years of age, who was not only a son but also a father and a husband, suffered a cardiac arrest in Castleblaney in County Monaghan. Luckily enough, at the time he was in company and the 999 call was made. There were people on the scene at the time that carried out CPR on him. As I said, I suppose the locals who were there and made that 999 call stayed in constant contact with the ambulance service while they were waiting on an ambulance to arrive. Not only had the locals time to get the defibrillator, to do the CPR, to make contact with the ambulance service, they waited and they waited and they waited. The ambulance had to come from Navan. It was redirected to Dunjoughlin, and this is all in County Meath, as you know, before it got to Ballybay, which is just outside Castleblaney in County Monaghan. My understanding is that there is an ambulance and an ambulance service based in Castleblaney, which would be literally 10 minutes from where this incident happened. In the end, Minister, this gentleman was 1 hour and 15 minutes waiting for the ambulance to arrive, and he was still alive and had a good strong pulse when the ambulance did arrive. Unfortunately, when that gentleman was taken into the ambulance, he lost his life. And his mum and his family would maintain to this day that had the ambulance response time been much quicker, had doctor on call arrived on the scene, the outcome quite clearly could have been very, very different. He leaves behind young children and a wife, his mum and dad and sisters and brothers, who are absolutely traumatised and heartbroken from the outcome of this. I put it to you, Minister, for anybody in such a critical condition to have to wait that length of time for an ambulance just isn't good enough in this day and age. Not only, as I pointed out, within 10 minutes of Castleblaney, where there is an ambulance service to address and go to calls as such, they were another 10 or 15 minutes away from Monaghan General Hospital. That ambulance was being directed to Cavan General Hospital, where there is an A&E unit. I put it to you, Minister, that length of time just isn't good enough. Now, we have met with the National Ambulance Service in December to address these issues, but I have a couple of questions that I'd like to put with you today. But unfortunately for that family, that's not where this issue finishes. A mere 10 days later, another member of that family, who was critically ill for a long number of years, but at one point became critically ill 10 days after he'd lost his son, called on the ambulance again. His wife, who's in her 70s, had to suffer the trauma of losing her son, and 10 days later call on the ambulance service again. To not put a tooth on it, Minister, the ambulance got lost. When they rang that 999 call, they were told the ambulance was in Shercock in County Cavan, which is literally 10 miles away, a 10-minute journey at most. Okay? The ambulance got lost. When the ambulance did show up, they were told they had no sat-nav and they were given no contact details of where the 999 call had come from. Now, that gentleman had to wait an hour and 25 minutes. 10 days after they'd lost their son, who'd been waiting an hour and 15 minutes. He had to wait an hour and 25 minutes. Thankfully, the outcome was much better for him. His life was saved and he was got to Cavan General Hospital. But I put it to you, Minister, that family are absolutely traumatised. And I would say to you, they're not the only ones in the constituency of Cavan Monaghan are bewildered by the ambulance response times.
Thank you. Ministers, 4 minutes.
And thank you, Deputy, for the sincerity and the appropriateness at which you brought this issue in. Can I just say from the outset, I'd like to extend my sincere sympathies to the family of that young gentleman that you've described there, and to the harrowing story and circumstances that he is insured. And I'm very conscious that no mealy-mouthed words that I'll issue here today with statistics or figures will go any way towards answering the what-ifs and the maybes and the buts that that family have to live with every day of their lives. And listening to me talking about the global macro picture about response times in the Cavan Monaghan area and what percentages of calls have been achieved satisfactorily and within an appropriate response time will go nowhere towards solving the anguish of those people. And the reality is, when you're talking about ambulance times, you're talking about life and death, and we cannot afford to get them wrong, and I accept that absolutely from the outset. So please, Deputy, don't assume that this is a defence or this is it's just a script by way of background and explanation from the Department. Ambulance response times are helpful for performance measurement. However, it should be recognised that sole reliance on response times does not provide a comprehensive picture of modern ambulance service performance. Response times tell us how fast the service was provided, rather than how well the patient was cared for. Response time performance is being globally reviewed as to whether it is the only appropriate measure of pre-hospital patient care. While rapid deployment and timely arrival is accepted as being necessary, patient outcome indicators are now being viewed as a more appropriate measure of patient care and experience. The National Ambulance Service has developed a suite of key performance indicators to measure patient outcomes and experiences, and these are currently being piloted to be included in the National Service Plan. That being said, I am aware that the Delta response times in the North East have been below target. I note, however, that Echo response times are on or above target in this period, September to December 2017. A number of developments have been made by the National Ambulance Service in order to address the issues of response times. I know too that in border counties, the National Ambulance Service works closely with the Northern Ireland Ambulance Service in order to provide a more responsive service for patients. The capacity review, published in 2016, identifies particular difficulties serving rural areas such as this region. The capacity review indicated that the only practical way to improve first response times in rural areas is through voluntary community first responder schemes. The National Ambulance Service continues to work with local CFR groups across the North East region to enhance services. There are currently 25 CFR community first responder groups in the North East region. I have also been advised by the National Ambulance Service that it is improving regional coverage and deployment across rural areas, including Cavan and Monaghan. The National Ambulance Service is moving away from ambulance provision from fixed bases to dynamic deployment. This means that resources can be used across a region so that if demand increases in one area, other resources can provide cover as required. In addition, the National Ambulance Service has developed the Intermediate Care Service to provide lower acuity hospital transfers, which frees up emergency ambulances for the more urgent calls. A permanent emergency or medical support service has also been established to provide a more timely response to persons in rural areas. Over recent years, year on year, additional investment has been directed towards the National Ambulance Service. This year, an additional sum of £10.7 million has been made available, which includes £2.8 million to fund new developments. New developments include the development of alternative pathways to care and the Here and Treat clinical hub, expected to go live soon in the National Emergency Operations Centre. This will divert some lower acuity patients to alternative care pathways and will free up some emergency capacity. In time, it is hoped that such initiatives will help to improve response times around the country, including in the Cavan Monaghan area. To conclude, Deputy, I can assure the House that the National Ambulance Service is focused on improving ambulance response times throughout the country. And can I again just reiterate my comments at the beginning, Deputy? I don't mean to be insincere by giving those kind of facts and figures. They don't do a service to the issue involved.
2 minutes.
Thank you, Minister. And just like you said yourself, it is, I suppose, a more general answer. And I'm raising this in a topical issue because I am really trying to get to the crux of this for this family, and they really do deserve answers. And I appreciate that it's Minister Harris's portfolio and you're stepping in from today, which I really appreciate. But I would ask you to bring back these specific questions that I'm asking, because this family do deserve answers. We've met with the National Ambulance Service, that's fine, but they want answers from the Minister who's got responsibility, because our constituency, critically here, the constituency of Monaghan and Cavan are suffering. They are suffering. They want to know why they had to wait an hour and 15 minutes for an ambulance service on that particular date for their son who lost his life. Why they had to wait an hour and 25 minutes for their father 10 days later. Why the advanced paramedic unit was not sent to this emergency. Why did Doctor on call not come that night. I just don't think it is good enough for the National Ambulance Service. And they said it in all sincerity at that meeting that the ambulance got lost, there was no sat-nav available in their ambulance, and that they had no contact number for the family who made the original call. I mean, in this day and age, we'd sack anybody in our office if a constituent come in and they hadn't taken the particulars of somebody. You'd be very upset with a member of staff doing that. This is a matter of life or death. It really isn't good enough in this day and age for the National Ambulance Service for giving answers like that they got lost, no sat-nav, no contact number. Sitting for the elderly gentleman on the second occasion in this scenario, that ambulance sat outside a local shop looking for directions, blindly looking for directions to the house the call came from, because they had absolutely no contacts. And finally, Minister, I would ask you, I have written to Minister Harris about this, I have written to the Taoiseach about this. And Minister Harris kindly set up that meeting with the National Ambulance Service. He also gave a commitment, and so did the Ambulance Service, that they didn't feel the answers were good enough, if they didn't feel they were focused enough, that we at least, and that family at least, deserve to sit down with the Minister. They want to be heard. That's all they're asking for, is that they want to be heard. Now, Minister Harris has written back to me saying, due to diary constraints, he can't commit to a time now. This family deserve to be heard. 15 minutes out of his diary would not be too much to ask for a simple meeting. And I would ask the Minister to please go back with those specific questions I've asked and give me specific answers.
Minister Daly has 2 minutes.
First of all, I will certainly go back, Deputy, to Minister Harris, and as you said, I'm deputising for him here, but I'm happy and more than willing to go back to Minister Harris and repeat that request and do it with the sincerity and do justice to it for how you've presented it here on the floor of the House. And you are right, it's not acceptable, and these aren't answers that are acceptable. The answers that I read out is not acceptable for that family, and that's no comfort for them with their what-ifs and what-buts. And you are right, as a representative of that family, and they need a voice here in this chamber, as well as they need a voice with the ambulance service, to demand accountability. And it's not more than just a choice by us, it's our responsibility as public representatives is to ensure we get accountability for these failures in the systems, because there is a management structure in place within the National Ambulance Service at a macro level and at a local level, and then there are operatives carrying out those duties. And we have to get accountability, and we have to get the answers for that family, and I will support you in that endeavour at whatever level I can, and I certainly will impress upon Minister Harris my desire to see this brought to a conclusion. I know that you have met with the National Ambulance Service. They have told me that in the briefing note here, and that they have undertaken to get back to you with the answers and with more detail on the operational failures that occurred that day. And that's the very least they should do for that family, and indeed for the rest of your constituents, because we don't want to be tearing down confidence in the system for everybody else who's going to be worrying about their mum or their dad, or if it's them themselves. We owe it to all of them to provide the assurances that these, whatever word you want to put on it, mistakes that were made, being a very polite form of doing these mistakes were made, won't happen again, and that there is somebody held accountable, and that there has been system changes since that and lessons learned from it and implemented. So I certainly will do my bit to support you in that, every bit I can do, Deputy, and will ensure that to impress it upon Minister Harris.
We proceed to the second.